Dear students, in this session we are beginning from page number 129, paragraph number 2. In this paragraph, Peter Barry makes us aware of the second concern of post-colonial criticism. And what is the second concern of post-colonial criticism? That is about language. Language itself is a second area of concern in post-colonial criticism. Whose language? The language of the colonizer. To make us understand the second concern, Peter Barry gives us 3 examples. One is that of W.B. Yeats, the other is of James Joyce, and the third example is of Seamus Heeny. He is making a reading of the writings of these 3 authors and makes us aware of the concern of language in post-colonial reading. Let us see. For Yeats, as often with the post-colonial writer, an uneasy attitude to the colonial language is evident. His injunction to Irish poets that they should learn their craft implies the need to serve a humble apprenticeship. So through these lines, what we understand is W.B. Yeats, he had great concern with language. He rejects the language of the colonizer. He commands the Irish writers to concentrate on their own particular language. And that is what we see in this line. His injunction to Irish poets. Okay, injunction. What is the meaning of injunction? A command, order, or admonition. He commands the Irish poets that they should learn their craft. Here, their craft refers to their own style of writing, their own language. This humble attitude to language may remind us of Stephen Dedalus' thoughts about the English language in James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, published in serial form in 1914-15. Now comes a reference to the next author. The name of the next author is James Joyce. Who is James Joyce? It is given there in your notes. James Joyce was another Irish writer who is perhaps the greatest novelist of the first half of the 20th century. He challenged the limits of fiction with his stream of consciousness narratives in works like Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake. So W.B. Yeats was an Irish writer. Now we come across another Irish writer, that is James Joyce. He is famous for his stream of consciousness technique in novels. One of his novels, or rather his first novel, is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. The main character in that novel is Stephen Dedalus. In that novel, Stephen Dedalus makes a comment. He tells himself, what is that? The language in which we are speaking is his before it is mine. My soul frets in the shadow of his language. So this is the sentence that he tells to himself in the novel, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, chapter 5. There, the reference is to the language of the colonizer. In the novel, the main character, Stephen Dedalus, he expresses his contempt and rejection of the language of the colonizer. And now we move on to the next example given by Peter Barry. That is from the famous author Seamus Heeny. Who is Seamus Heeny? It is given there in your notes. Seamus Heeny, 1939 to 2013. Seamus Heeny was an influential poet whose forays into postmodernism are evident in his collections like Death of a Naturalist, North, Fieldwork, and The Spirit Level. Seamus Heeny, again an influential poet of the postmodern era. So what is the reference made to him? More recently, the Irish poet Seamus Heaney, in a poem entitled The Ministry of Fear, recalls his childhood unease and self-consciousness about his pronunciation of English, and remarks that Ulster was British but with no rights on the English lyric. So this is the reference made to Seamus Heeny. Here the reference is to his poem titled The Ministry of Fear. And the lines, some of the lines are given here. Those hob-nailed boots from beyond the mountain were walking by God all over the fine lawns of elocution. So what is the meaning of hob-nailed? Hob-nailed means transfixed or jettison. Okay, here hobnails refers to the nails or the pins inserted to the soles of the boots to fix it. So that is actually the nails or hobnails. So here the meaning is transfixed or jettison. Those hob-nailed boots from beyond the mountain, it refers to the influence of the colonial language, where walking by God all over the fine lawns of elocution. So the influence of the colonial language is actually dominating the native language. That is the idea we get from the poem by Seamus Heeny. And remarks that Ulster was British but with no rights on the English lyric. So Ulster refers to a place in Ireland, a province in Ireland. Ulster was British but with no rights on the English lyric. So the province of Ulster in Ireland, it was under the clutches of the British colonial power, but the people there, they don't respect the English language. They always adore or they always uphold the native language. So these three writers, W.B. Yeats, James Joyce, and also Seamus Heeny, these three writers coming from Ireland, they voice for the language of their native place over the language of their colonizer. Ireland was a British colony. This linguistic deference amounts to a sense that the linguistic furniture belongs to somebody else and therefore shouldn't be moved around without permission. Some post-colonial writers have concluded that the colonizer's language is permanently tainted, and that to write in it involves a crucial acquiescence in colonial structures. So what is the problem the post-colonial writer faces in his process of writing literature? Sometimes they have to adopt the language of the colonizer, but they feel that the language of the colonizer is always polluted they have degraded the language of the native land. If the writers of the post-colonial era, they have to express their own feelings, that has to be in their own native language, rejecting the colonial language. And that is what highlighted in this particular line. Some post-colonial writers have concluded that the colonizers' language is permanently tainted. Tainted means polluted, and that to write in it involves a crucial acquiescence. What is the meaning of acquiescence? This is there given in your glossary, page number 134. Acquiescence means giving tacit assent or silent submission. So if you are writing in the language of the colonizer, then you are silently submitting to the colonial powers or to the colonial structures and styles of writing. Language itself then is the second area of concern in post-colonial criticism. So this is the conclusion of this paragraph, and here Peter Barry makes us aware of the second concern of post-colonial criticism, and that is language. I am moving to the next paragraph, and in the next paragraph he talks about the third characteristic of post-colonial approach. And what is it? The third characteristic of post-colonial approach is related to the identity. Identity as doubled, hybrid, or unstable. We will see how he describes or explains that third characteristic of post-colonial approach. Let us read. As this implies, Yeats, being a member of the Protestant ruling class in Ireland, has a double identity as both colonizer and colonized. And it is the recognition of such double identities which is one of the strengths of the post-colonialist view. Here again, the example of W.B. Yeats is given. When we analyze the identity of W.B. Yeats, we find a double concern there. What is it? W.B. Yeats, he was a member of the Protestant ruling class in Ireland on one side, and on the other side he was part of the civil war against the ruling class. So in the identity of W.B. Yeats we see hybrid elements. One is that of a colonizer and the other is that of the colonized. And it is the recognition of such double identities which is one of the strengths of the post-colonialist view. So this happens often when we discuss post-colonial literatures. W.B. Yeats, he had two identities in him. One is that of a colonizer as being part of the Protestant ruling class, and the other is that of the colonized because he voices for the freedom of his native land from the clutches of the British rule. So we find two elements of identity, both contrasting with each other in W.B. Yeats. The same thing we can see in another writer, another Nigerian writer, and his name is Chinua Achebe, and that is given in the next line, page number 130. And who is Chinua Achebe? Note number 5. Chinua Achebe, doyen of African literature, His portrayals of his homeland Nigeria tries to break the prejudiced stereotypes of Africa that are usually found in colonialist European writings. Things Fall Apart is part of his famed African trilogy, which also includes The Arrow of God and No Longer at Ease. So, who was Chinua Achebe? Chinua Achebe was a very famous African writer, a Nigerian novelist, and he is famous for his trilogy, the 3 novels titled Things Fall Apart, The Arrow of God and No Longer at Ease. And why does Peter Barry bring Chinua Achebe here? Let us see. Thus, the Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe, publishing his first novel Things Fall Apart in 1958, was criticized by an early reviewer for affecting to identify with African villagers when actually his university education and his broadcasting job in the capital city of Lagos should make him identify, it was implied, with the values of civilization supposedly brought to Africa by Europeans. So this is the fact. Chinua Achebe was criticized. For what? For his university education and also for his job in the city of Lagos. Why? These 2 aspects, his university education and also his job, these 2 aspects can be related to his affinity towards the colonizer. Why? The university was set up by the colonizer in Nigeria, and also his workplace was also set up and run by the colonizer. So if he gets educated in an institution set up by the colonizer, and if he earns a living by working in an institution set up by the colonizer, has he the right to voice for his own native land or the freedom of his own native land? So that is the question, or that is the criticism made against Chinua Achebe. The post-colonial criticism, it makes us aware of this doubleness in the identity of the writers, because it is something that is very essential to the post-colonial writers. It happens so, knowingly or unknowingly, and we have to accept it. We will read that line again. Thus, the Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe, publishing his first novel Things Fall Apart in 1958, was criticized by an early reviewer for affecting to identify with African villagers. Underline. Affecting, what is the meaning of here? Moving or exciting feelings or emotions. So pretending to identify with the African villagers when actually his university education and his broadcasting job in the capital city of Lagos should make him identify with the values of civilization. Civilization is within single inverted. The so-called civilization supposedly brought to Africa by Europeans. So Africa again is considered as the other by the Europeans. Africa is not at all considered as a civilized land. If at all there are civilization, it is brought by the Europeans according to the Westerners. So if Achebe is studying in the university set up by the Europeans and also working in an institution set up by the Europeans, then how can he feel one with the African culture? Or rather, the theme that he explains in his novel Things Fall Apart, is it simply to pretend that he identifies himself with the African villagers. That was the criticism. This emphasis on identity as doubled or hybrid or unstable is a third characteristic of the post-colonial approach. So the post-colonial criticism makes us aware of this doubleness in the identity of the post-colonial writers and also the citizens in the post-colonial era. With this, I end this session. We will continue our lesson in the coming sessions. Thank you.